Political instability, ethnic conflicts, refugee crisis, and cross-border insurgencies, making it one of the most sensitive and strategically important regions which requires careful diplomatic engagement. Our next session will dive deep into this, for which we invite Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay, Mr. Vivek Johri, who will be in conversation with Brigadier Sanjay Agrawal. Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay served in Indian embassies in Mexico, France, Cuba, the Permanent Mission of India, New York, and External Affairs Ministry in various capacities. He's been associated with several think tanks and industry bodies, such as the CII, where he heads a task force on Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. Mr. Vivek Johri is a former IPS officer who retired as the DGP of Madhya Pradesh. He is also ex-DG BSF and ex-National Security Advisor to the government of Mauritius. He's worked for long years as an intelligence officer and has expertise in counter-terrorism and security-related issues related to India and its neighbors, particularly Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh. Brigadier Sanjay Agrawal, Sena Medal and Bar, is a former security advisor to the Union Home Ministry, advisor to National Highway Authority of India, and the government of Seychelles. Awarded twice for his gallantry, he is a mountaineer, corporate trainer, and distinguished professor at SRM IST. He is also a founder member of the Society for Culture and Environment. I would request the gentleman to commence the session.
यहाँ बैठे सभी दर्शकों को और हमारे ऑनलाइन दर्शकों को नमस्कार। हमारा अलग सत्र है चाइना पर और इसी के बाद 2 बजे एक सत्र है पाकिस्तान और ऑप सिंदूर पर। इस सत्र में हमारा ध्यान केंद्रित रहेगा म्यांमार, बांग्लादेश और कुछ हद तक भूटान पर, और इनके ऊपर चीन का और अमेरिका का जो प्रभाव है वो किन चीज़ों पे है। हमारे संग 2 विख्यात इस विषय को जानने वाले म्यांमार के पूर्व राजदूत और हमारे भोपाल के पूर्व पुलिस महानिदेशक विवेक जौहरी साहब दोनों हैं। पहले मैं इस विषय की भूमिका बैठा दूं, फिर मैं इनसे सवाल जवाब करूंगा और मैं टाइमर लगाऊंगा ताकि हम दर्शकों से प्रश्न ले सकें। तो जैसे कि आपको मालूम है कि भारत के पड़ोस में अनेक तरीके की इंटरनेशनल ग्रुपिंग्स यहाँ पर गुट हैं, जैसे सार्क, साउथ एशिया एसोसिएशन फॉर रीजनल कोऑपरेशन। इसमें भारत के सारे पड़ोसी हैं, तकरीबन म्यांमार नहीं है, और इसको भारत ने ठंडे बस्ते में डाला हुआ है। चाइना चाहता है कि ये जागृत हो, पाकिस्तान का भाव बढ़े। दूसरा है बिम्स्टेक, बे ऑफ बंगाल इनिशिएटिव फॉर मल्टी सेक्टरल टेक्निकल एंड इकोनॉमिक कोऑपरेशन। इसमें भारत के पूर्वी पड़ोसी हमने रखे हैं, तो इसमें मालदीव्स, पाकिस्तान, अफ़गानिस्तान नहीं है। और क्या है? म्यांमार और थाईलैंड। ये गुट अब उभरता, महत्वपूर्ण बनता और महत्वपूर्ण बनता जा रहा है। और तीसरा BBIN, बांग्लादेश, भूटान, इंडिया, नेपाल। और आपको याद होगा कि बांग्लादेश में संघर्ष जारी है, बढ़ रहा है, और 1.5 साल से जब से शेख हसीना उनकी प्रधानमंत्री 5 अगस्त 2024 को भाग के इंडिया आ गई, तब से इस्लामिक कट्टरवाद और बढ़ रहा है, हिंदुओं पे प्रताड़ना बढ़ रही है। बॉर्डर के बारे में वो हमारी बात करते हैं और हमें चिकन्स नेक की याद दिलाते हैं। तो अनेक समस्याएं यहाँ पर हैं। म्यांमार के साथ एक तो चीन का प्रभाव, दूसरा वहाँ से रोहिंग्यों का पलायन बांग्लादेश, बांग्लादेश से भारत। उसके बाद चीन को वहाँ एक गर्म पोर्ट चाहिए और वहाँ पर उसी के बाहर अमेरिका को उसके ऊपर सर्वेलेंस चाहिए, तो वो बांग्लादेश से म्यांमार जा रहे हैं। इन सब चीज़ों के ऊपर बातचीत। और आखिरी में भूटान, छोटा सा खुश देश, वो एक अकेला देश है जो वर्ल्ड में अपनी हैप्पीनेस इंडेक्स जोड़ता है। सौभाग्य है कि 2 साल वहाँ रहा मैं भारत सरकार के भेजने पर। उनको भी सब प्रॉब्लम है। उनकी एक साक्तेंग वाइल्ड लाइफ सेंचुरी है जिसको उसने अपना बता दिया चीन ने। क्यों? क्योंकि वो भारत के तवांग के ठीक नीचे आती है। दूसरा, सदर्न भूटान में डेमोग्राफी और इंडिया से आने जाने के ऊपर कुछ नाजुक विषय हैं। तो इस सब को देखते हुए मैं अपने म्यांमार के पूर्व राजदूत गौतम सर से पूछना चाहूँगा। हिंदुस्तान के पूर्व राजदूत म्यांमार में से, so what do you feel are the broad patterns of our relationships with our neighbors historically and post independence?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Am I audible? Yeah, thank you. Well, good morning or good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, Brigadier Agarwal, for the introduction and also for the question. And let me, at the start, also really thank the BLF, Raghav Chandra, Shulakshana, and all the BLF team for the excellent arrangements and for the lovely kind of platform and forum that you have created. You know, this is my first visit to Bhopal, and I'm also just terribly impressed by the city. So it's, you know, very much a case of love at first sight. So I think you've asked me a very sort of big question, and let me try and encapsulate that very quickly. And I think this has a bearing on what is happening in Myanmar, might have a bearing on what's happening in Bangladesh also. You know, we were born in 1947 after a struggle for freedom. Freedom against imperialism, freedom against British colonialism. So we were born under a star of freedom. And I think for the first, I would say literally about 40 years, our basic democratic reflexes were that of supporting struggles for freedom, struggles for liberation in our own region and beyond. And that gave us tremendous responsibilities. You know, we played a role in the decolonization process. We played a role where there were conflicts as a result of both the Second World War and part of the decolonization process, places like, you know, Laos and Vietnam and Korea and so on like that. But somewhere around the 80s and 90s, our reflexes started changing. And there were three sort of developments that contributed to that. First was the Soviet intervention in, maybe not sequentially, Soviet intervention in Afghanistan. You know, Chaudhry Charan Singh Sahab was the prime minister then. His first reflex was to support the Mujahideen against the Soviets. Then Indira Gandhi ji came and realpolitik intervened, and we decided to really actually support the PDPA government, which was propped up by the Russians. The second was in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, you know, we had backed the Tamil cause up to a certain point, and we also intervened at the invitation at that point of the Prime Minister, Jayawardene. But somewhere in the process of supporting the Tamil struggle, we were bitten by the LTT, and so we recoiled. And the third was in Myanmar. Now, this may not be exactly, you know, chronologically, but in Myanmar, again, our first reflex was to support the 1988 pro-democracy students' agitation. But then in 2 years, the military was able to reassert control. The democracy agitation fizzled out. In fact, most of their leaders, including Aung San Suu Kyi, were imprisoned. And as a result of which, we had to cautiously backtrack and remend our fences with those in authority. So there was a kind of reality check in the 80s, around the time that we were about 40, in our middle ages. Today, I feel that our politics towards our neighborhood, our politics towards freedom, our politics towards democracy, all that has turned actually more than middle age, perhaps even old age. We have become cynical. Today, we have no compunctions about supporting dictatorial regimes wherever they may be. In Afghanistan, we have a radical right-wing Islamic regime and the Taliban. But for pragmatic or realpolitik reasons, we are able to support them. In Myanmar, we have a full-fledged pro-democracy agitation. It's not just a pro-democracy agitation, it is also a movement for decentralization of a very multi-ethnic state, and yet we are ambivalent at best. And in fact, many would say that we are actually, beneath that ambivalence, we are really supporting the junta. And we do that in the name of stability or security. So I think this is the aging of our kind of initial reflexes. Whether this is right or wrong is something that I think we can discuss a little later. But essentially, I would say that security concerns have prevailed over concerns about freedom and democracy. Briefly.
Thank you. An exhaustive answer for a good overview on the subject. और इसके साथ ही हम विषय के अंदर घुस जाते हैं. विवेक जी से मैं पूछना चाहूँगा कि जो ये बांग्लादेश और म्यांमार में हो रहा है, इसका भारत पर और ख़ास तौर पे भारत के पूर्वोत्तर राज्यों पर क्या असर है और इसके प्रति भारत की क्या नीति है और होनी चाहिए?
थैंक यू ब्रिगेडियर साहब एंड गुड आफ्टरनून एवरीवन. म्यांमार पे पहले हम बात कर रहे हैं अभी. जो एम्बेसडर साहब ने बोला उसी को मैं थोड़ा आगे बढ़ाता हूँ. म्यांमार की जो ट्रबल है, जब से वहाँ डेमोक्रेसी आई और फिर चली गई, 2021 का जो मिलिट्री कू हुआ, तब से जो वहाँ के रेजिस्टेंस ग्रुप्स हैं वो काफ़ी ज़्यादा लड़ाई लड़ रहे हैं वहाँ की सरकार से. नाउ ये रेजिस्टेंस ग्रुप सब हमारे बॉर्डर पे बैठे हुए हैं. इसमें चाहे कचन लिबरेशन आर्मी हो या दूसरे रेजिस्टेंस फोर्स हैं जिनका एक कंसोर्टियम बना लिया है. इंडिया के म्यांमार बॉर्डर के डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स का अधिकांश एरिया अब रेबल्स ही कंट्रोल कर रहे हैं. सरकार जो है वो मिलिट्री जुंटा की है. तो जो भारत सरकार के सामने समस्या रही है इसको रिस्पॉन्स करने की, वो इसलिए बहुत कॉम्प्लिकेटेड हो जाती है. और वो मैं डेफिनेटली आपसे सुनना चाहूँगा कि इसको किस तरह से डिप्लोमेटिकली मैनेज किया जा रहा है, क्योंकि सिक्योरिटी के एंगल से बड़ा क्लियर सा एक अप्रोच दिखती है कि आपको सरकार से तो बात करना ही पड़ेगी फॉर योर ओन प्रोजेक्ट्स एंड अदर डिप्लोमेटिक सॉर्ट ऑफ डेवलपमेंट्स, पर बॉर्डर पे आपको रेबल ग्रुप से भी संबंध बनाने पड़ेंगे, क्योंकि उन सभी बॉर्डर में हमारे मिज़ोरम और मणिपुर ख़ास तौर पे इन दो स्टेट्स के ट्राइबल्स के इथनिक कॉन्टैक्ट्स, इथनिक रिलेशंस, इकोनॉमिक रिलेशंस बहुत ज़्यादा घने हैं. तो जो म्यांमार के बॉर्डर डिस्ट्रिक्ट में हो रहा है वो सीधे सीधे इन दो राज्यों पे असर डालता है. सबसे ज़्यादा ये मणिपुर पे असर डालता है, क्योंकि वहाँ जो इथनिक जिसे कहते हैं एक पैरिटी है, इथनिक रिलेशंस हैं, वो बहुत ज़्यादा घने हैं. कुकीज़ हों या मैतीज़ हों. नाउ इन सब को देखते हुए भारत सरकार के सामने हमेशा ये समस्या रहेगी म्यांमार में कि आपको बॉर्डर पे तो विद्रोहियों से बात करना है और राजधानी में सरकार से बात करना है, और दोनों से आपको संबंध अच्छे ही बना के रखना पड़ेंगे, क्योंकि म्यांमार हमारे लिए इम्पॉर्टेंट है हमारी लुक ईस्ट पॉलिसी के लिए. हमारे बहुत से डेवलपमेंटल प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं जो वहाँ चल रहे हैं, जो हमारे नॉर्थ ईस्ट को साउथ ईस्ट एशिया से जोड़ेंगे. और विद्रोहियों से बात करना इसलिए ज़रूरी है वरना उनका जो रेजिस्टेंस का असर है वो आपके इन दो राज्यों पे बहुत ज़्यादा आता है. तो ये एक बड़ा कठिन सवाल रहा है हमेशा से, और भारत सरकार अभी तक दोनों ही तरह से हैंडल कर रही है ताकि ओवरऑल शांति रहे और एक पॉलिसी जो है वो आगे बढ़ सके. पर इसका जो डिटेलिंग है वो मैं एम्बेसडर गौतम से रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि उसको थोड़ा आगे बढ़ाएंगे.
तो जैसे सर ने जिक्र किया और हम सबको मालूम है कि भारत की दो पॉलिसीज़ हैं, एक तो नेबरहुड फर्स्ट और दूसरी है एक्ट ईस्ट. तो इन दो पॉलिसीज़ का आकलन आप कैसे करते हैं, और जो विषय विवेक जी ने उठाया उसकी प्रतिक्रिया आप कैसे करेंगे?
क्षमा कीजिए अगर हम अंग्रेजी में जवाब दें, क्योंकि उसमें ज़्यादा
अवश्य।
तो ऐसा है कि there is no doubt that both the neighborhood policies and neighborhood first policies and Act East policies were visionary policies and were very progressive policies. In fact, I don't know how many of you are very familiar with these, but let me just remind you that when Prime Minister Modi came to power in May 2014, one of his very first acts was to visit Bhutan, and the second was to visit Nepal, which at that time was in the midst of a very deep constitutional crisis. And the speech that he gave in the Nepal parliament, literally swung the Nepalese people from thinking India to be a kind of, big bad brother, rather a tough brother, to someone who they could trust and relate with. Now, if we look 10 years later, if we look at our neighborhood is very troubled. Our relations with all our neighbors, practically, minus one, are troubled. Disturbed. In many cases, they are hostile. In some cases, they are sour. In some cases, they are positively warlike, as we have in the case of Pakistan.
हस्तक्षेप के लिए माफ़ी। इस विषय में कहा तो ये जा रहा है कि भारत के अपने पड़ोसियों के संग सबसे अच्छे संबंध तालिबान अफगानिस्तान के साथ हैं।
जी, बिल्कुल, मैं उसी पे आने वाला था कि हम सोचते हैं कि भाई कम से कम एटलीस्ट हिंदू धर्म से हमारा नेपाल के साथ एक संबंध बना रहना चाहिए। लेकिन अगर हम आपको एक सवाल पूछे, आज हमारे पड़ोस में हमारे सबसे अच्छे दोस्त कौन हैं, तालिबान अफगानिस्तान या हिंदू नेपाल, आप क्या जवाब देंगे? तो इसका मेरा ये कहना है कि देयर हैज़ बीन अ प्रॉब्लम in our relations with our neighborhood, and we can look at this problem in many ways, but I think one really big problem with our neighborhood is that particularly where we share contiguous borders, the big brother syndrome is very strong, and the big brother comes in two forms. The big brother comes as the big bad bullying brother, the big bully brother, and the other form of the brother is the magnanimous brother, the good brother. And actually both those paradigms of relations are condescending to our neighborhood and kind of in a way strike at their dignity. So we need to think of a kind of different paradigm that does not look at our neighborhood in a kind of patronizing way. Problems there will always be, but what happens is small problems get magnified, amplified, and then media and sometimes the political discourse aggravates and exaggerates it even further. So I think this has been one problem as far as our neighborhood first is concerned. It's not that it's bad all the time everywhere. It was with Maldives very bad at one time. After all, we have come back. With Sri Lanka, it was also bad. We have, retraced our steps, but it's unstable. We do not know at what time our relations with whom could turn good or bad. So again, I have some ideas about what should be done. Maybe I don't want to take this particular intervention. If you give me a chance, we'll come back to it. But I'll switch on to Act East. See, Act East in many ways was a kind of more active version of Look East. What was Look East about? Until about until Prime Minister Narasimha Rao thought of Look East, by and large, our attention was more towards the West, towards Pakistan, towards Iran, towards Afghanistan. Our labor was going to the Gulf, and in general, beyond that, even Europe and so on. So when we realized in the 90s, with Taliban, first taking over Afghanistan, relations with Pakistan going up and down, and eventually very bad, and then we also realized that entire East Asia was the area of emerging economies. We realized that the East is an area of opportunity. And so we struck up a relationship with Southeast Asia. But, there is a lot of conventional knowledge about Act East. And of course, it's a very good thing. We should build up our relations with a region of the world where our cultural imprint has been there for centuries, and we have no problems with, and these are lands of opportunities. But, the Act East policy was always framed as a relationship towards Southeast Asia. If we look back now, in the course of these 20 years plus that has elapsed since then, 30 years, 25 years, really can we say that we have really developed our our relationships with our Southeast Asian neighbors as much as we thought and planned. We also thought of this relationship as a check and balance on China. But in fact, today, now if we see, particularly Myanmar, you'll see that China is encroaching strategically into our space, and we are in fact not being able to respond to that space. And our economic relationship with China is much stronger than our economic relationship with the area of the Act East, which is ASEAN. So in fact, the more you open this Act East policy, it will gravitate just by force of economics towards China. And on top of that, you know, the Chinese, just like they have a CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor on the western side in Pakistan, China has a China-Myanmar Economic Corridor that starts from Yunnan and goes up to the Bay of Bengal at a port called Chowphu. Chowphu is the single best natural deep sea harbor in the entire Bay of Bengal. And we hardly hear any discussion. China has an economic zone, gas pipeline, oil pipeline, and is now developing that deep sea port. And I would dare say that we have a strategic blindness, that we are not aware of China. We are resisting China's presence in the Indo-Pacific, in the Pacific Ocean, but we are not
in our own backyard.
That they are there in our own backyard.
बहुत अच्छे से आपने म्यांमार का विषय और म्यांमार की क्रिटिकलिटीज़ हमारे लिए समझाई, धन्यवाद। विवेक जी, आप तो मध्य प्रदेश के महानिदेशक पुलिस के रह चुके हैं, दिल्ली में आपने केंद्रीय पुलिस बलों का नेतृत्व किया है, मॉरिशस में आप सिक्योरिटी एडवाइज़र रह चुके हैं, नेशनल सिक्योरिटी एडवाइज़र। इस सब को मद्देनज़र रखते मैं सोच रहा था कि बांग्लादेश में जो माहौल बिगड़ रहा है राजनीतिक तौर से और वैचारिक तौर से, ऑन आइडियोलॉजिकल ग्राउंड्स एज वेल, ये भारत के स्ट्रेटेजिक इंटरेस्ट में, हित में नहीं है। इसका मूल्यांकन आप कैसे करते हैं?
थैंक यू ब्रिगेडियर साहब। इसके लिए ये कुछ पॉइंट्स यहाँ स्क्रीन पे हैं अभी, and if you can just go through those points, except the one which says India's border vulnerabilities, बाकी पांचों पॉइंट जो है, they in fact are just internal problem of Bangladesh, one can say. Whether it is the first religious nationalism and linguistic nationalism issue, or the role of major parties, Islamic radicals, Rohingya refugees, their relations with Pakistan, these are all very internal matter of Bangladesh. So probably a natural question may come up that what have we to do with that? Why should we bother about it? तो इसका सारा पांचों पॉइंट्स का आंसर वो बीच वाले पॉइंट में है, इंडिया की बॉर्डर वल्नरेबिलिटीज। द थिंग इज कि if we start one by one, sir, first one was the religious nationalism to linguistic nationalism, and now reverse. This point was also elaborated by a recent article by Ambassador Raghavan in which he advocates that the current conflict going on in Bangladesh is basically the 47 thought fighting with the 1971 thought. So I term it as the religious nationalism versus linguistic nationalism. Now, 47 was based on religion, so that was a nationalism based on religion. Then 71 came and Bangladesh decided to fight for its linguistic nationalism. And now in 2024, when this all unrest happened, and now since in 1.5 years, what Brigadier Saab has said, that things are developing in such a way that it looks like that they are going back to religious nationalism in some way. Are they really going or not? This is yet to be seen. The jury is still out on that, but some developments do point towards a general trend in the thinking of various streams which are emerging there. So in this comes the role of major political parties. We all know Awami League had been a very friendly party to India, and during its tenure, we never really thought much about the other political parties or the Islamic hardcore elements in Bangladesh, because they were taken care by more or less by the government. Now, in the current scenario, Awami League is absent. it is not allowed to regroup, it is not allowed to take part in the political process. So what option do we have now? Now the remaining major political party, the first is of course BNP, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which was in power earlier, and we had some relations with that party. We had worked with them. We had some off and on, hot and cold relations with that particular government when BNP was in power. And then there are the Islamist parties which are now trying to regroup and come up in the political arena itself. Then of course there are various small groups which of course they are not very known, so I have just jotted it down. In fact, around 70 new parties have been formed in last 1.5 years in Bangladesh. So it's very difficult to keep track which is really having some weight. The Samta Party or Amja Tardal, then Janjatiya Gantantrik Dal, all these type of parties are just coming up. But the main party, of course, remain the BNP and, of course, the Jamaat-e-Islami. Another religious group there powerful is the Hizb ut-Tahrir. So these three are probably going to decide the complexion of next parliament. And the chances of BNP getting a fairly bigger chunk of parliament is quite high as of now, if at all the election happens on time. So this is the political scenario. And why we should worry about this? Because the government in Bangladesh and our relation with Bangladesh depends on which political party is going to rule there and what policies are they going to follow. Are the Islamists going to influence the decision of Bangladesh government in future? Then our own previous experience say that we should be worried. We are not supposed to interfere in their process because it's their internal thing. But we need to be alert and be ready for the consequences of any such alignment appearing in Bangladesh. So that's why it becomes important. Then, as I said, Islamic radicals were quite dormant during the Awami League government time, and now they have coming into the forefront. So that is another part which our previous experience say is not good for us. If Islamist elements gain in Bangladesh, then our own northeastern area and even the mainland gets affected from the hardliner groups which starts operating in Bangladesh in past. So we have to be alert on that. This is one ramification. Then the presence of Rohingya refugees, with Brigadier Saab has pointed out. Rohingyas are displaced from Myanmar and then housed in Bangladesh, but they always try to infiltrate into India. Now this is a lot. The Rohingya refugee camps are a very good feeder point for any hardcore Islamist group. And previously there have been attempts by whether Jaish-e-Mohammed or Lashkar-e-Toiba from Pakistan to have some links with them and try to get them infiltrated into India. So that is why this aspect, though they are in Bangladesh, but they are definitely a point of worry for us. And then we have the realignment with Pakistan. Now throughout the Awami League government time, Pakistan was simply not allowed to play in any role in Bangladesh. Now this is changing. Remember that Pakistan was quite isolated strategically in the region. So the moment Pakistan gets an opportunity to enter Bangladesh, have a relationship, revive defense relationship, revive economic relationship, they will be too happy to do it, and they are trying their best right now to do it. Now, is this Pakistan-Bangladesh new friendship is a cause for worry to us? I would say yes, we need to worry that. We don't think that Pakistan will become a proxy for Bangladesh will become a proxy for Pakistan. But the linkages always give chance to the hardliners and the militant groups to start seeking base in Bangladesh area, and our border area and our own insurgent groups, they also have a lot of linkages in Bangladesh. So that is where we have to be very cautious about that. Then our border vulnerabilities, I need not elaborate it much. We all know that the border with Bangladesh is not fully fenced. So it is partly open, partly problematic, and then a lot of smuggling, human trafficking, all those things keep on happening on that border. where BSF is guarding it, and they have a lot of trouble in even erecting the fence. Bangladesh is not allowing the fence to be erected in certain areas. So certain areas are open for the cattle smuggling, and then the human trafficking, which is the reverse thing, Bangladeshis entering India. So all those vulnerabilities will increase if there is a hostile or not so friendly government in Bangladesh. So this is what I would say in nutshell. This is how the things are proceeding there, and why we should be definitely very cautious about what is happening. Keep a watch, be alert, and be ready to counter few things which may emerge in future. Thank you.
You wanted to say something? Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Johri Saab. I think you laid out some of the security challenges emanating from Bangladesh very well. But let me sort of also put it a little more in context and also give a counterpoint to that. You posed this question at one stage whether what has happened in Bangladesh August 2025 onwards, or 2024 onwards, was really a kind of movement for Islamic radicalization, which was essentially or core anti-Indian. And I think analysis is half the process of decision making. If your analysis is wrong, your decisions will be wrong. Your policies will be wrong. I think, I agree that there are all the security threats, including China, which you may have inadvertently missed, coming out of Bangladesh, and Islamic extremism coming out of Bangladesh, anti-Indian sentiments coming out very strongly, even attacks on Hindus. All these are very, very real, and they should be taken seriously. But I would say that it would be a mistake to reduce what happened in Bangladesh in August 2024 to just a movement of Islamic radicalism. See, first and foremost, it was a movement against authoritarianism. The authoritarianism of Sheikh Hasina, which we were seen as abetting and complicit with for practically 20-something years. Right? And that, in a way, transferred or, in a way, tainted India as well. And then there is a direct relationship between India, treatment of Muslims, and India and Hindus. And in a way, it also turned into an anti-Hindu and anti-Indian dimensions. But, if we look back at Bangladesh's history, and there are some severe misreadings that we made. Of course, Bangladesh became, or East Pakistan became part of Pakistan. When 1971 took place, I think in our minds, we thought that Bangladesh had suddenly switched from an Islamist republic to a secular Bengali, language revolution, etc., etc., pro-Indian. One day pro-Pakistan, next day pro-Indian. But the reality is that Bangladesh, through all this period, through all the regimes, whether they were Ershad or Ziaur Rahman or even Sheikh Hasina and Mujibur Rahman, that they have been pro-Indian, they have been secular, they have been nationalist, and they have been pro-Pakistani and pro-Islamist currents that have been there concurrently. Do you remember some years back, there were massive, the Chittagong constant there, and there were bomb blasts simultaneously in about 100 or 200 places in Bangladesh. So, this thing has been there. My brief point is to say that Bangladesh is a country that oscillates from one to the other, and that there is a large center that is still there. And I think today, the overtures that we have made to Bangladesh, obviously these are overtures in preparation for the elections and after the elections, is towards the BNP. And that is an overture, once again, to that center which also exists. So, I think, there is one problem I find with looking at neighborhood issues purely in terms of security threats and considerations, which is that we fall into a kind of epistemological trap. Once you look at security, you'll start looking at threats, and then you create enemies in the process. Maybe it's just a function of Mr. Johri being a police officer and me being a diplomat. I would like to see that we should think in terms of what binds us together. What are the things that can bind us together? And of course, security will play a big role in that. But we also have to think above security into the things that bind us together. And there I will say, India is the largest market in this area. No other country in this area can really threaten us economically in the way, let's say, opening up trade with the United States or China or even Australia or others might do. And these are countries with small farmers, just like our country is a country with small farmers. If we simply open trade in our neighborhood unilaterally, and if we simply opened up agricultural trade in our neighborhood unilaterally, we would be binding the farmers and the people of this region to India as a market. In a way, we'd be reaching the people through their stomachs. And I can't think of a better way to approach.
Excellent. तो मैं आप ही पे आ रहा हूँ. पहले विवेक जी ने बहुत अच्छे तरीके से और विचार बिंदु लिख के भी दिखा के एक चीज़ बताई. गौतम जी ने उस पे टिप्पणी करके एक सैद्धांतिक रूप से सही क्या होना चाहिए और वो सैद्धांतिक रूप वो चीज़ कितनी ज़मीनी हालात जिससे कि ये डील करते हैं उस ज़मीनी हालात पे उस कसौटी पे कितनी सही उतरती है, इस पे भी थोड़ा प्रकाश डालेंगे.
I would like to clarify one thing. Ambassador Gautam has really given a view that ideally should be our policy for our neighbors. Now, I only would like to submit one thing. When I talked about the religious nationalism trying to return, I have not termed the 2024 agitation as a religious one. If you can see, it is still a question mark in that slide. Are we returning to that? I have actually posed a question. Now, there are definitely two very clear strands in Bangladesh right now. There is a strong percentage of population who are not with Islamists. And then there are those who are really convinced about converting the whole country into Islamists. Because if you see the latest commission, the Reform Commission, which they have submitted the report, they have recommended removing the secular word from the constitution. Because basically they are trying to go towards more of Islamic use than remaining secular. So that is what I was pointing out, that there is a chance that it may go that way. I still don't think that it has gone that way at all. And then what Ambassador Gautam has suggested and said is correct, that if we can tie up our neighbors with our huge economy, then probably it will act as a pressure to their respective governments to maintain good relations. Although probably this policy, Ambassador Gautam, failed with Pakistan. We had good economic relations till our relations soared, and now we have zero economic relations with that country.
You know,
Thank you.
at one stage we were improving our economic relations with Pakistan. If you remember, this was the period of the composite dialogue, army-to-army talks, cultural people-to-people relations. We tried to, so...
अमन की आशा.
Aman, but the issue was there that it was the Pakistani army that prevented the trade to develop. Because they realized that if trade develops, then their relevance will go. So, in fact, it actually, in a way, proves the point.
देखिए, इन विषयों पर और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय कूटनीति पर हम लोग नॉर्मली ऊपर के लेवल से बात करते हैं और हम लोग ये कहते हैं कि ज़मीन पे चुटर पुटर चीज़ें होने से नीति बदली नहीं होनी चाहिए. एक बात, उसका समर्थन अभी पूर्व राजदूत जी ने भी किया. लेकिन जो ज़मीन पे हो रहा है, जिसका कुछ वर्णन आपने किया, बांग्लादेश में एक अमरीकी आईजी की, स्पेशल फोर्सेस के आईजी की अज्ञात परिस्थितियों में मौत, बिना पोस्टमार्टम किए अमरीकी दूतावास ने उसकी बॉडी ले ली इत्यादि एक बड़ी रहस्यमयी कहानी, और उस पर हमने शोध की. आईएसआई ऑपरेटिव्स का वहाँ मारे जाना और कुछ लोगों का ये ज़ोर से कहना कि साहब वो वहाँ से जो आपने सेक्युलरिज्म की वर्ड हटाने का प्रस्ताव है उसी के संबंध में कहा कि ये बंगाली आइडेंटिटी हटा के इस्लामी आइडेंटिटी लाना चाहते हैं. तो ये जो ज़मीनी डेवलपमेंट्स हैं, इनका प्रतिबिंब भारत की शोधित रिवाइज्ड नीति में कैसे दिखना चाहिए, ये आखिरी सवाल, उसके बाद मैं आपसे पूछूंगा।
ये वैसे जवाब आपको देना चाहिए एम्बेसडर गौतम, पर मैं थोड़ा सा इसमें ज़रूर पॉइंट करूंगा एज अ पर्सन ऑन ग्राउंड। जो मुझे लगता है कि हमें गवर्नमेंट जो भी बने उनसे डील तो करना ही पड़ेगा और करना भी चाहिए। अगर बीएनपी की लीडरशिप में गवर्नमेंट वहाँ आती है या एक मिलीजुली सरकार आती है, दोनों केस में गवर्नमेंट से डील करने से हम पीछे भी नहीं हट सकते और ना ही हटना चाहिए। और बाकी जो वनरेबिलिटीज़ हैं वहाँ पे, उसको डेफिनेटली टाइम लगेगा उसको एड्रेस करने में। आपको काम तो बांग्लादेश की सरकार के साथ ही करना पड़ेगा। बाकी डिटेलिंग तो मैं एम्बेसडर गौतम से रिक्वेस्ट करूँगा, वो करेंगे तो अच्छा रहेगा।
So, thank you, Johari Saab, for addressing the question to me also and to you, Brigadier. Let me also answer a question that I left, which was about Myanmar. On
म्यांमार के बारे में सर बोल रहे हैं।
नहीं, दोनों बांग्लादेश और म्यांमार, दोनों बांग्लादेश और म्यांमार. On Bangladesh, I would say that look, we should not, we fall into the trap of a reactive policy. कि वहाँ कुछ हो रहा है फिर हम react करते हैं. We should have our own kind of a little more strategic kind of approach. The main thing about Bangladesh that we should realize is that we have 4,000 kilometers of borders. It's a population that is close to 200 million. It's a population that is linguistically joined with us. Can language be overnight substituted by religion? When we think of diversity, we think typically of religious diversity, but linguistic diversity is another very big concept. In fact, the birth of our Indian nation was accompanied by linguistic states and linguistic riots and so on, ourselves. So we cannot, and it's a place where hostile interests are also interested. Especially after Doklam, the Siliguri chicken's neck has also become very vulnerable. So it is a country that we cannot afford to allow to turn hostile against us. That should be our starting point. Once we have that starting point, then you will develop the policies that will get you to where you
to suit those.
Right. And on
अभी दर्शकों के सवाल लेने के लिए हमारे अतिथि तैयार हैं, जो कृपया सवाल, सबसे पहले ये सफ़ेद जैकेट में हाथ, उसके पीछे उधर जो सज्जन खड़े हो रहे थे उधर लाइट आंख में चमक रही है, तीसरा सवाल उधर है, सेकंड लास्ट रो है, शायद मरून जैकेट है, इधर से कोई सवाल था, चौथा सवाल इधर है, ये अभी पहले ये 4 सवाल होंगे, उसके बाद हाथ दोबारा उठाए जाएंगे।
I have 2 questions. One is more related to the Myanmar thing that we were talking
और
about.
मेरा निवेदन है कि अपना प्रश्न बिल्कुल संक्षिप्त रखिएगा,
हाँ जी,
थीसिस
बिल्कुल।
नहीं।
And I'm asking it in English because Mr.
जी,
Gautam is...
भाषा का कोई
yeah.
प्रतिबंध नहीं है।
जी. So we are closely monitoring the situation at the border with Myanmar, and with the riots happening between Mehetis and Kukis, don't you think it becomes very important for us, because we need a permanent solution there. Just putting up a band-aid is not going to help. So is it more beneficial for India to have a more strict or more conducive environment with the government as well as with the extremist groups there? Because the moment we have gone inside the Myanmar border,
What's the question?
so things
Second
have improved.
question.
So second question is more related to the changing situation of India across with the neighbors. Is it
Question,
more
yes.
because of the ideology of the Indian government over last 10 years? And what I'm referring to is the Hinduism that we are now pursuing more aggressively, and that is why our neighbors are getting more annoyed or more disturbed. Is that the core reason behind it? Whether it is Bangladesh, whether it is Pakistan, whether it is any other region for that matter. So these are the 2 questions for me. Thank you.
The much more tricky second question first. So I would say that phenomenon that you're talking about is part of this larger set of what is called the big bully brother. It is very definitely partly because, religion is a very emotional thing. And obviously emotions play on emotions. And what we are seeing is that these religious emotionalism started from Pakistan, started growing in India as well, has erupted in Bangladesh, and each of these religious kind of extremisms or reactions, let's call it, are feeding off each other. And so that practically the whole region is now looking at things in terms of religion. Now, this brings me to Myanmar. You know, you use the word extremists. The people who are fighting the junta on the border, they are not extremists. They are not even separatists. They are people fighting for democracy and federalism. And when I talked about our commitment to freedom earlier, I was referring to this. They don't see this conflict with the junta there in religious terms. There are Christians, there are Buddhists. Everyone is involved in the struggle against the junta. This is a straightforward fight between pro-democratic elements and ethnic groups that want greater autonomy, greater freedom, greater equality within the Myanmar Union against a very centralized military rule. A military rule that has been in existence since 1960. And with a brief, you can say 10-year kind of hiatus. Now, in 1962, when the military took over, Myanmar was in the forefront of Southeast Asian countries, the landward countries. It was the richest place. All the flights that today go via Thailand used to go via Rangoon. You know, the hub of transport used to be Rangoon. In 60 years, the military threw the country back to the ranks of the least developed countries. And in the 10 years that you had relative freedom, once again, Myanmar grew up. Now, the military coup in 2021 basically reversed that. And the message to the youth was, you have no future under a military dictatorship. And it is that, you know, I would say that in Myanmar, what you are seeing is the struggle for freedom that was aborted by the military in the 60s. And we should relate to that as a struggle for freedom and liberation.
Yeah, next question.
Yeah, my question is to both Gautam and Mr. Johari. Why is India becoming myopic and missing the big picture? Why is West Bengal politics taking precedence over Indo-Bangladesh relations? And the example that I want to specifically ask you about is the Mustafizur cricketer episode. I think it was when you ask the Calcutta team to drop Mustafizur and playing into the hands of people who don't really know better how it's going to affect relations between India. You're actually encouraging those people. And you're upsetting Bangladesh, and you've seen how it's blown out of proportion. Why are we missing the big picture?
Thank you.
Well, you know, basically I couldn't agree with you more. When I talked about reactive policies, I think the foremost example I had in mind was Mustafizur. It's like going out of the way to poke the Bangladeshis. This was the one area, you know, we had restricted visas. This was the one area of people-to-people, relations that was continuing. Now we are treating Bangladesh like Pakistan. Earlier we treated Afghanistan like Pakistan. No, I mean, we should not reduce everything to Pakistan. You know, that's basically one thing. And why is this, why have we turned so myopic? I think, you know, one factor is the media and the radicalization of political discourse. Today, you know, diplomacy is largely something that is conducted with some degree of patience and responsibility.
And
Today,
behind closed doors, whether
behind-
we are doing it publicly now.
Public. Today, governments, whether they are in Bangladesh or in India, are reacting to massive media pressure and also reacting to fringe elements in the political discourse. And, you know, it makes the work of government extremely difficult to be able to find a way in
Yeah,
between.
next. Yeah,
My question was that I have actually two questions.
you have to ask which of the two guests you want to answer your question first, please.
Right. Sir, if you would like to answer that in terms of Myanmar, we see that we are kind of having a tug of war kind of situation with China in terms of all the ASEAN nations. So there I would like you to shed some light upon so that in terms of our actions and in terms of Bangladesh, sir, we see that Bangladesh is being used as a base for some northeastern insurgent groups as well. So there I would like for you to take some examples or actions in terms of diplomacy and strategically for ourselves. Thank you.
Answering the first part, the tug of war with China, it's not only in Myanmar, it's all over within. Why are you confining this only to Myanmar? We are fighting China in almost every geographical area where we had our influence or we want to have more. So this tug of war is a normal political process, and each country will try to assert strategically which is important for that country. So don't be surprised by a tug of war in Myanmar. Why not? Ultimately, China wants more presence in Bay of Bengal. So the best bet for them is Myanmar. Bangladesh would be next in the current circumstances. So India has to ward them off. So we have to play our game accordingly. We can't escape this tug of war. We have to fight it. Number one. Number two, in Bangladesh, you say that the Indian insurgent groups are having a lot of bases in Bangladesh. Well, as of now, this statement is not correct. If you say, ask me, have you asked this around 10 years ago, then yes, it was there. It was a major problem, which Indian government solved it with the help of Bangladeshi government and the Bangladeshi security agencies. So it is not that the bases are there operating very easily or they are in large number. It is not correct as of now. What I have pointed out is that we have to be careful due to our past experiences that it should not happen again. What was the position 10, 15 years back? That we should not allow it to happen. Thank you.
Can I just add to that, Brigadier Sir?
We'll take on the next question, sir. We are very briefly. Aap karo? Very
No,
briefly.
you know, actually, as he said, the Northeast insurgents are no longer, at least in great measure, active in Bangladesh. And if you remember, the Bodos were also active in Bhutan at one stage. They were driven out. Actually, we have Indian insurgent groups very active in Myanmar, but we don't seem to be concerned about that. You know, this is the kind of strategic myopia that one gentleman there used and blindness that I use, that we pick and choose who we want to make an enemy. China is sitting in the Bay of Bengal, we don't talk about it. Some crazy conspiracy, American conspiracy that has probably backfired in Bangladesh, and our media is full of it. You know? And on China and tug of war, I'll actually say there is no tug of war. We are surrendering space to China. Where is the tug of war? Where are we talking about Chofu? Where are we competing with them economically? We are not competing with them economically. It is a walkover, I would say.
Yeah, next question.
यस सर, मेरा सवाल बांग्लादेश को लेके है कि बांग्लादेश में जो चुनाव है उसमें बैकडोर हमें इंटरफेयर करना चाहिए, वो खासकर बीएनपी को प्लस अवामी लीग को बैकडोर मिलाया जाए, वो हमारे इंटरेस्ट में रहेगा, जमात इस्लामी भी दूर होगी क्योंकि हमारी 4000 किलोमीटर की बॉर्डर में हमारा पूरा इंटरेस्ट है।
इसका बड़ा सिंपल सा जवाब है, हमें किसी भी बाहरी देश के किसी भी प्रोसेस में इंटरफेयर नहीं करना चाहिए, पीरियड।
अभी नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चंस, एनीबडी? अच्छा, एक यहाँ, दिस नंबर 1, इनको माइक दीजिए। दूसरा यहाँ ऑरेंज शर्ट के बगल में, वेयर कांट सी मैम, प्लीज थोड़ा सा। अच्छा, सीन नाउ, देयर इज अ लेडी इन लाइट ग्रीन, आई थिंक देयर। तीसरा सवाल, एंड देन वी आर एंड ऑफ टाइम। ओके,
good afternoon, sir. My simple question is कि when we talk about the big brother syndrome, हम देखते हैं कि भूटान इन्वेजन चाइना ने कर रखा है और बाकी जितने हमारे नेबर्स हैं, म्यांमार है, मलेशिया है, श्रीलंका है, ये बेटर डेवलपमेंट के झांसे में आके चाइना की तरफ अपनी लीनियंसी थोड़ी ज़्यादा बढ़ा के रखते हैं। तो डोंट यू थिंक बिग ब्रदर सिंड्रोम के अंदर अगर इंडिया आता है तो उसे एज अ बिग ब्रदर डिफेंस भी करना चाहिए उनका, एंड ऑल्सो ग्रोथ प्रोस्पेक्टस फॉर द कंट्रीज, ताकि वो हमारे तरफ पब्लिक पॉलिसी वाइज अलाइंड रहे?
Before independence, there were no borders. People could move pretty freely, and no such problems were there. There were no problems of big brother, small brother, nation state, all this security business in a way.
the magnanimous.
Yeah. So, look, in the end, India's greatest strength is its cultural and soft power. And it was this cultural and soft power that bound this region to us. Today, what we are trying to say is that, look, if we supplement this cultural and soft power with economic and trade and market power, that will be one great binder. But of course, in South Asia, India should be the, the overall security provider for the whole region. I mean, we would like them to accept that, but we can't force them to accept that. It's a respect that has to be earned.
छोटा क्लैरिफिकेशन मैं देता हूँ उनके क्वेश्चन का. देखिए, चाइना if it is moving into these areas with lot of economic power, आपको ये देखना चाहिए कि इंडिया के पास क्या सरप्लस इकोनॉमी है उस तरह का सपोर्ट देने का. आंसर एज ऑफ नाउ इज नो, वी डोंट हैव सरप्लस इकोनॉमी. नाउ चाइना के पास भी सरप्लस इकोनॉमी है, और इट बीइंग अ डिक्टेटरशिप दे कैन डिसाइड अपॉन दीज थिंग्स कि कहाँ कितनी मदद करनी है. इंडिया में नहीं कर पाएंगे आप. इसलिए हमें जो एम्बेसडर साहब ने कहा है, सॉफ्ट पावर पे हमें ज़्यादा ध्यान देना पड़ता है, जो हमारा नेचुरल स्ट्रेंथ रहा है हमेशा से. That is the reason why we can't really think of going into that big brother attitude और हम पैसा दे दें, इकोनॉमी बढ़ा दें. वो अभी हम नहीं कर सकते हैं.
No counter questions, please. Next question.
सर, मेरा प्रश्न आपसे ये है कि जो हमारी वेस्ट बंगाल की सीएम है, उनका जो इग्नोरेंस है रोहिंग्यास के प्रति, उसको आप कैसे देखते हैं? क्योंकि वो कहीं ना कहीं वेस्ट बंगाल में अस्थिरता बहुत ज़्यादा स्तर पर ला रहा है और आगे भी लाएगा. धन्यवाद.
On this, I have to sort of differ with my security experts. Perhaps you also, madam. I have traveled extensively in the Rohingya areas in Rakhine State in Myanmar. They are one of the most pathetic and hapless people that inhabit South Asia. They were willing to sell information on their own people to the military junta just to be able to get access to medical camps and education and even just daily provisions. As far as I know, and again I could be corrected, the number of Rohingyas that may have infiltrated this way or that way into India is about 50,000. 50,000 is nothing. In a country like India, 50,000 Rohingyas, even if you expand it to 80,000. We have created a Rohingya security threat actually for political reasons, and it does not merit that at all. In fact, I will tell you, as Muslims, Rohingya were the furthermost extremity of the old Mughal Empire, So when the Rohingya thinks of India, he still thinks of India as his motherland. Yes, this is something that people don't understand. People make these enemies out of this kind of security.
किंतु सर, आप जो ऐतिहासिक रूप से बोल रहे हैं और ये व्यक्ति दर्शक जो ज़मीनी हालात का बखान कर रही है, इनमें दोनों में हैंडशेक एरिया कहाँ है?
I would say that our perceptions are wrong.
वो जो कह रही है वो तो हकीकत है.
नहीं, आप बताइए. Actually, please tell me, while it is always possible that Pakistan will play with any exiled community, let's say religious community, and use them, how much concrete information do we have that Rohingyas are working against the Indian state?
विवेक जी को माइक उठाने पे मजबूर कर दिया.
There are a few things which cannot be discussed here, but Rohingyas के camps में जो ट्रेनिंग चलता है पाकिस्तान बेस्ड मिलिटेंट ग्रुप्स का, वो एक रियलिटी है. अब वो इंडिया के अगेंस्ट अभी यूज़ हुआ है नहीं हुआ है, ये एक डिफरेंट एस्पेक्ट है. प्रॉब्ली आई एम नॉट कॉम्पिटेंट टू कमेंट ऑन दैट, बट आई नो फॉर श्योर कि ये ट्रेनिंग्स हुई हैं. अगर पाकिस्तान बेस्ड लश्कर या जैश वहाँ जाके कैंप लगाता है, तो आई डोंट थिंक कि वो बांग्लादेश के लिए कैंप चला रहा है. अल्टीमेट टारगेट तो हम ही बनेंगे, आज नहीं तो कल बनेंगे. दिस इज माय टेक.
बैकफुट पर खेल के विवेक जी ने चौका मार दिया. अगला प्रश्न
जी, मैं ये कहना चाह रही थी,
और ये आखिरी प्रश्न होगा. मैम, खेद है, मुझे कई इशारे मिल रहे हैं, टाइम खत्म हो चुका है.
जी, मैं ये कहना चाह रही थी कि अब आपने सॉल्यूशन क्रिस्टल क्लियर कर दिया है, तो उस सॉल्यूशन के ऊपर जो स्ट्रेटेजी बनानी चाहिए उसको इलॉबरेट करें आप.
अब तो मैं रिटायर 9 साल हो गए मैडम, मैं रिटायर हो चुका हूँ. अभी तो कोई मैंने मौका ही नहीं है. अच्छा,
प्रियदर, you want to say something?
No, on the Rohingyas. See, don't forget that Rohingyas' main struggle is with the Myanmar authorities. for a place in Rakhine state which they had considered
अरे
their home.
उनकी स्ट्रगल किसी से भी हो, सिरदर्द तो हमारे हैं ना। अभी प्रिय दर्शकों, बहुत अच्छा लगा और इतने अच्छे और विस्तृत विचार मैंने कईयों का मॉडरेशन किया है, मज़ा आ गया। एक राजदूत, एक वरिष्ठ पुलिस अधिकारी, आप दोनों को मेरा प्रणाम।
Well said, Brigadier Agarwal. I think it was a wonderful session, and well, we cannot choose our neighbors, but we can definitely choose how to deal with them. Thank you for this discussion, and I would now request Mr. Naresh Kumar Raheja, General Manager, SBI, to come on the stage and felicitate our speakers for this session. Mr. Raheja presenting the BLF Memento 2026 to Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay. Former IPS officer Mr. Vivek Johri. And Brigadier Sanjay Agrawal.
I got one yesterday. This is for photograph.
BLF Memento, designed by Gond artist Durga Vyamji. Let's hear it for our speakers. Everyone in the audience, please.
अच्छा, since everybody is in the Mahakumbh of knowledge, जिन जिन के पास ज्ञान है वो इस हॉल से बाहर मत जाएगा, because now it's time for an open quiz for every